Yeah, we are live. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Tech Talks with Santosh. And today we have a very really special guest. You may know him by the name of Beeman. This is what he uses for his Twitter handle, and he's really famous on Twitter. And but his actual name is Bram. Am I correct? Right?
Yep,
Ah,
Bram. Yep.
okay. So how you pronounce it?
Bram in Dutch.
Bram. Bram. Oh, okay. We are going to talk about full stack generators, and Bram is actually working a lot on full stack generators from a few months. Few years, I can say. And
Yeah.
he has also some open source projects out there. So I was really interested to know about those, and then just went to Biman. So I'll just call Biman because
Perfect.
I
Yep.
somehow I like this name. So I just spoke to him and he was really kind to actually accept the invite, and we are going to talk about the same today. So over to you, Bram, and you just go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, cool. So thanks so much for having me, Santosh. My name is Bram Borggreve, if you want to hear the full name, but I figured it's easier, B-Man. I've been running with this nickname for like 25 years or something. So I listen to both, but B-Man is easier or B. Just call me B if you like. Yeah, I'm from the Netherlands originally. I was born in the Netherlands and I live in Colombia right now with my beautiful wife. And yeah, we spent the whole pandemic here, and
Oh,
that's also one of the moments I got really productive. Specifically, like last from I guess August on till now has been really productive. And one of these things that I started a YouTube channel, also inspired by you, Santosh. I hope to reach 1,000 as well. You had a big milestone last week.
thank you.
And one of the other projects I've been working on in, I think, September was after having chatted with Lars, I started building an XPM stack. So Lars and I had 3 chats about structuring NX. And in NX, you can have a lot of structure and you can have a real complex structure, if you will. And I thought it would be great if I could automate this.
Oh,
And this is where an XPM stack comes from. And it allows you basically to create a full stack application in, I think right now it maybe takes like 10 minutes to generate because it does a lot of things. And, but yeah, you give it one command and then you start it up and then you have a full stack application. So you have an API, an admin front end, and a mobile app all together in one nice NX repo. So yeah, so that's NXPM stack, and one of the most important things in the stack is that there's 2 parts where we use code generation. That really helps us speed up development. So we can go in more detail about which parts they are, but yeah, so you can generate an app from scratch, and it's totally working. And I got quite some ideas on how to make it more interesting further down the line. So yeah, not sure if you have any questions already, or if you
no,
want
no,
me
no.
to.
Let's yeah. It's we were actually supposed to talk about full stack generators, and you gave some small introduction about what it is and then how you're working on npm nxpm stack, right? So
Correct.
can you just talk a little more about it? I mean, what it is and where actually users can, or developers, it's for developers, right? So how you developers
Correct.
can use it to be more productive.
Yeah, correct. So if you can share the screen, I'll quickly show the slides as a guide.
Yeah.
So I thought it was nice to have a conversation with Santosh and not show the whole presentation, because this one is online for Angular Dutch. You can find it. And I was in Angular Bogota, but that's in Spanish. But if you check the Angular Dutch talk I gave in March, that's actually this presentation. So in order to not duplicate, but I can use this a little bit. So NXPM stack, what I basically boils down for me to automation and opinion. So it's important to have a strong opinion about how to scale an application so that you just know where to put certain things. And in order to enforce this, it's essential to have automation. So I think these 2 things combined are make your app scale very largely. And well, here is yes, Lars influenced NPM definitely, NXPM. Yep, this was after this calls, and I already had the idea of building it. It was the talks with Lars that gave me an idea on how to structure it. And instead of doing that one time in one app, I figured I'm going to make it generic so I can repeat this process over and over again. Now, I think my screen is not sharing very well. I see little blocks, and this is because of I'm using Firefox. So let me, if you have a second, I'll
Yeah, sure,
join
sure.
with another browser. My Firefox is
Yeah.
not. Lars made a dent in the universe. Yes, he did. It's not the first one. So let me see. I will stop sharing this one and entering with the other one. Yep, now I appeared 2 times.
Yeah. Do, do you want me to remove one?
This
Okay,
should
you
be
did that.
better. Yeah.
Ah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so in the demo, what I do in this presentation is I give a demo, and it takes a bit long. And
Yeah.
so this is why I start with the demo, because when I started a generation of the project, which we actually do like this. So if a developer who's watching wants to run it, you need to install the NXPM CLI. It's this package, global add NXPM CLI, or npm install -g, and then you run this command nxpm stack init, and you pass it a name. And after this runs, it creates a whole workspace for you. You have a Nest.js API, you have an Angular frontend, and an Ionic mobile app.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah. So these are 2 steps, and I call it a three-step process. So after you've done this, you go into the directory and you run yarn setup, and it will configure the database for you, and it will open a Docker container, and it runs anything you need to do. So literally in 3 or 4 steps, you have a working project ready to run. Now, this is not the only thing that I automated, because I did some more things. For instance, if you push it to GitHub, it will start running a GitHub action, and it will start actually running your tests. And
Wow.
if you push it up to Heroku, for instance, it will automatically deploy, and it will do everything needed. For Heroku, right now, you need 2 things manually to be able to log in. That has to do with cookies. There's still a little bit I need to automate, but the whole idea is make it as simple as possible for somebody to start a new project, run it, and do the right thing afterwards. So NX Workspace by itself is nice, but it's still bare bones. You still need to add a lot of things for it to make work, and NXPM Stack is the thing that helps this. So the reason I was building this is because building scalable apps is hard, and it's if you work on a team with a large team on a larger app, maybe you've worked with multiple people in a repo. People start deviating from some ideas, and you might have one idea, but it doesn't apply for another situation, and then people try to find their own solution, and now you can basically see which part of the app is built by who, and this is not ideal. It's generally better if you just look at a piece of code and you don't know who it wrote, because it all looks very similar. So one of the reasons why I did this, I was doing the same thing way too often. So I work with teams to build apps, and to basically, if they have an idea, we want to make a prototype. And you can build a prototype like really small, or you can build a prototype that builds on something that's already working. Now, if I had this idea for years, when I started with Angular 2 at the time, it was like 2016, I was amazed by the schematics. And Lars from the Angular CLI team implemented schematics, first implementation.
Right.
And this already gave me the idea. I think if you chain a lot of schematics together, you can build a whole app.
Yep.
I had this idea for years, and I really like automating things, and I really, really like NX. So this is a combination. Now, when you look at NX, for those of you that are not aware, NX allows you to have multiple applications in a single workspace. So you have a repository, and in there you can have various apps And you can even do this across technology. So you can have an Angular front end, an SJS backend, you can have a React app or React Native app in there, or native scripts. Anything is basically possible. Everything that you can run. But additionally, NX has tools to manage your workspace. So you can have like generators, and there's testing and linting all built in. Now, one of the things that's common with NX is that you split up your application in libraries and applications. So the application itself is like a small shell, and this will start up this will basically boot the libraries. NX has a dependency graph, so it understands your dependencies, it understands the structure. And this causes that if you change one library, it will only recompile the library and the things that it needs to change, and it will not rebuild your whole app. And this is what allows you to work on it for very large projects. It's truly great. I have projects with hundreds of libs, and it just works. Now, there's an awesome plugin system, so you can add plugins. I myself maintain the Go plugin for NX. There is an NX Go. 2 days ago or 3 days ago, I saw an engineer publish the NX.NET plugin.
Yeah,
So right now
saw
you
that.
can do .NET. Yeah, you saw that as well.
We
And
have
there's
Python as well.
correct. You have Python. You have Flutter. There is Spring Boot. There's a ton of things. And actually, I think that's one of the nice things about NX. If you can run it through a command line, you can most likely run it in NX. Plus, take all the benefits, like caching your builds still works. Doesn't matter if you write a plugin yourself. You don't need to do anything special. And actually, yesterday I got in touch with James Henry, famous from ESLint and from TypeScript in general. And James sent me an example of how to do a depth graph in Go. And actually, I started implementing this, and I will start implementing this in NX Go. So now you can have your Go app in your NX workspace, and it will know the dependency graph, and it can do these things with this. So that's all very interesting, and love NX workspace. I think you as well really like it, Santosh, right?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
I keep talking about NX and NGRX both.
Right. And what kind of apps you use NX for?
So we have of course we have large enterprise applications which is built using NX. So we recently migrated one, and in past also I helped migrating one of the existing app which we had in Angular CLI, and then we migrated to NX.
Right. And do a lot of also splitting it up in libraries.
Exactly, what's needed. So in my earlier project, I mean before I was doing last year, so they wanted to actually have two apps, which was supposed to actually use most of the common libraries which we had. So
Right.
we ended up actually taking NX.
Yeah, very good. I think that's a very common use case where you have maybe a public front end or one for your admins, something like this. You have two apps that you want to run separately, but want to reuse a lot of work. So this is very nice, but for me, it's still like a low-level building block, and I want to have something else. So when we look instead about, I need to click here, NXPM stack, it adds an opinionated structure to NX workspace. So it generates the app for you, and it's fully type safe from the backend to the database. You have authentication, you have user management. A user can log in, can change their email. I'm about to release a new update that adds the user password reset, so you can do a whole password reset flow. So just all things that work good enough for you to not think about. And additionally, I add tools for rapid development. And one of these things is workspace generators. And I think we have a slide about it, but we might talk about this a little bit. If you're not going to use NXPM stack, I'm not mad. But if there's one thing I want you to use workspace generators in NX, because they really, really make your life easier. And it's the first step for me to get automation in your stack. So if you have an NX workspace today, and you see yourself doing the same thing over and over again, or the same commands to do an ng generate or an nx generate, you probably want to use workspace generator. Now, one of the other things that I do best practices are encouraged or automated. So let's, for example, say the test setup is already there with a GitHub action. This is really to encourage you to actually go and write the tests. So if you set up a new project, this might be something you will do later on. And I figured I might as well generate it for you and put it up. And then all of a sudden your test will go red. You know you need to change this. So this is a little bit about NXPM Stack. I'm not sure if you have like any questions or comments already at this point.
No, we don't have any questions so far, but we can continue.
Yeah, or if you have any questions yourself, that's
Yeah, I mean, we can not as of now, but we can continue, and probably I will have more questions.
Cool. So the next thing I want to do is a little bit like why add this layer on top and why add this structure. So if you think about NX and we talk about splitting up the application and the libraries, this is a very common picture that you get. And I think this is the basic 101 for NX. How do we do this? Well, in this case, you can see we have two applications, the API and the web application, and both they load in a library. So API has their API authentication and API product, and the web has its web product and web auth. And both have a shared dependency. So maybe, for instance, these are your types, right? So or your interfaces, the structures. Yeah. So this is kind of nice. And what you get right away here is that you are sure that if you have your types updated, that both the app, the API and the web app are looking at the same stuff. Now, this is all nice, but it doesn't really scale. This is nice for a smallish app, and if you start working like this, that's perfect. But if your app grows and you have more complex libraries, you might very well end up with circular dependencies. And this is something a lot of developers probably are familiar with, and this is not ideal. Now, there's a way around this, and the way around this consists of adding another layer. So instead of saying, hey, the API has one product library, we now divide it up into product libraries. Same for all the other ones, but let's look at the API product library. So for instance, here your product feature is going to be maybe your REST controller, or if you're using GraphQL, it's going to be your GraphQL resolver. So for the API, this is basically your public-facing endpoint of the API, and this API product feature depends on its data access library. So the data access library is only responsible for accessing the data, publishing maybe a DTO that tells the shape of the object that comes in. Now, with these things, you have certain types of libraries. So we have a feature here. We have a data access library, and on the front end, you have UI libraries, and they have a generic util library. So this is what NX basically suggests. NX has a great book about doing this, and they talk about this structure. So we have 4 types of libraries, and now with these libraries, we can make rules for ourselves to what can import from what. So for instance, a feature will never import another feature. And if you think about it, it doesn't really make sense. And for the front-end people here, let's look at the web application. A web feature will be basically your container component. It's a component where you route to, and they will basically inject the router, check if the URL, and they will use a service to fetch data. So this is all very much a formalization of things you probably already do. So I think a lot of people work with container components and UI components, or smart and dump components is what they also called. And in this way, you can divide it into libraries, and you get a lot of benefits. It helps prevent circular depths, as I said already, but also it makes building faster. So if I never change my web UI auth, it will never need to rebuild because it will just be static at that point. So there's a bit of benefits, but as I said, you can also add rules. This is something I will do in the future, where like features cannot import from each other, or not always. a data library will never import from UI. Doesn't really make sense. Also, if you think about it, data can import from each other. So in the backend, you see a lot like, okay, data service needs some other data service to do this thing. Let's say I change an email address and I want to send an email to my admin. You can do this using shared data libraries. Now, this is all well and good, and this is a very nice structure, but there's one issue with this structure, and you might see it from out the application. There's an arrow coming to each of its basically pillars. And this means that if I add a new category here, I also need to update the app. And ideally, we don't touch the app. The app should be as simple as possible, should not have any knowledge. So the way we can fix this is add another layer. So we add another small layer so that our applications, as you can see, the API right now only imports from core. And inside core, it will do all the other stuff. It will load all the features and they will load the data. And the same for web. It will load in the shell. And this is where all your routes live. And then your shell will lazy load the other things. At least that's what it does with Angular. And having this small layer on top will make your apps super small. They listen to a port, they load in the shell or the core, and the whole picture works. So this is, from an architectural point of view, my preferred way to build an app right now. And the main thing that Lars showed me, and this is also in my streams, but we talk about NX structure for, I think, 4 or 5 hours. So we have quite a lot of talks. But the types of libraries is the most important. Name them well. Make sure to have a thought about what goes where. And then things like tiny apps, I was already doing for years because it just feels right. So your app needs to be as simple as possible and just go there. But having this feature, data UI, library separation, this was really an eye-opener for me. Now, in NX, the way to do this is by using tags. So you can define tags, and this is one of the things I always forgot. So this was one of the reasons that I thought I need to automate this. So yeah, questions so far. If there's not a lot, we can just move on with with a lot of other things.
So one question here. So
yeah.
you said you also generate end-to-end testing. So it's like which framework or which library you are using right now?
So right now I do generate it, but right now it's the default. And having more advanced tests is definitely on the roadmap. So for the front end on Angular, it's going to be Cypress.
Okay.
For Ionic, I'm actually not sure what's added there. I use the Ionic Angular library, which is built by Devin Schumacher. And Devin has a great library, but I'm not sure what it uses. On the API, I also have an end-to-end test for the API. So, and this is where generation comes in. And I don't think I have a nice diagram. I do think I have a nice diagram. So let me quickly move in here. Yeah. So you might have heard me at some point about the Bang stack. And half a year ago, I was talking about Bang stack. It's Prisma, Angular, Nest, NX, and GraphQL. Now, if we look at this diagram, this is pretty high-level diagram. If we talk about testing, end-to-end testing the API, what I'm actually testing is the GraphQL interface. So my Nest.js API exposes a GraphQL layer, and this layer is consumed by, in this case, Angular and Ionic. And when I'm testing the API, I of course can do unit tests and figure out that my API, the logic works. But a lot of the logic is actually accept the request and put it into Prisma, or retrieve data from Prisma and return it back. So what I'm actually most interested about for my API is if my GraphQL contract works. So for me, GraphQL as a contract, I think that's the most logical way to think about it. It's a contract between the backend and the front end, which is strongly typed. And what I have here, and you can see it sit next to this API. So this GraphQL layer here, the green circle, this is a code generating step. This is a code generating step, and it generates for me an SDK I can use in Angular and Ionic. Now, and I use Ionic with Angular, so I can literally use the same code to access my Nest.js GraphQL. Which means that if here in Nest I change something, let's say I I add another required parameter to my one of my GraphQL requests, this will generate an SDK. And if I don't provide this in Angular, my Angular frontend will start complaining because it now has required property, and TypeScript is going to be mad at you. And one of the things I do for testing the backend, this GraphQL step also generates a bunch of test code I can run to test my API. And I call it end-to-end test. It's just a test runner. It runs a just, it starts up in my Nest.js application, and it basically starts firing off GraphQL requests to this Nest instance and check if the response is correct. And this is one of the things before I'm gonna. So right now, NXPM stack is like version 4.21, I think. Yesterday I made a release. I'm gonna wait to add this fully tested API, and then I'm gonna publish version 5. So I'm gonna be working on this. Now, this is all nice, but one of the issues we see is that if you start up a project and you set it all up, that's good. But now how are you going to maintain it? So if I'm going to write another new code, I also want these tests to be generated. You can see this similar with ng-generate. Actually, if you do ng-generate right now and you generate a component, you get an empty test. And it will check maybe if it says, hey, component works, and that's it. I like to take it up a notch. So if I do a generation step, I don't generate a component. I generate like 6 libraries with a bunch of components, controllers, services. I make changes to your database schema. I update it all. And I add a fully CRUD interface for your admin. So I also want to add these things for your tests. So I want to make sure that if I generate a bunch of code, the test should verify that if I have admin endpoints, they only can add it by an admin user. So there should be a simple test that try to execute this thing as a user, it will need to fail. It will need to fail. All these kind of things. Have 2 users, like you have Alice and Bob. Alice creates a record. Bob should not be able to read it because it belongs to Alice. So a lot of things that are super straightforward, but you actually want to make sure, because if you somehow break this security, you want your test to fail. And I don't want to think about writing the test because I'm super lazy and I always find another reason to not do something. So if it's about testing, I might be lazy and think like, you know what, I'm sure it's fine. It's way better to have these things generated, fail as soon as possible, and you're then motivated, incentivized to fix them because you want to see this little green action on your GitHub. So yeah, so this is basically the code generation step. This one is really, really helpful in making your apps grow. Now, NXPM stack has another code generation step, which is basically between Prisma and the Nest.js. And for the people that are not familiar with Prisma, I highly recommend checking it out on prisma.io. And they claim themselves as being the next generation ORM for Node and TypeScript. And what for me is the best thing about the best thing about Prisma is that you can define your whole data model and how it behaves in a model like this. So you can just express what you like. And I think for most developers, this model is already quite simple to understand. So you can see, okay, I got an ID field which is an integer, and we do an auto increment here. We have a title, content is optional. We have a Boolean published with a default value. And then here, this is how you add a relationship to the author. So it's a very expressive way. So you can just express whatever you like in your data structure. And now to consume this, we run a step, Prisma generate. And Prisma generate will create a client for you. So now you have TypeScript code to interact with your database, and you don't need to write any queries. And this is basically the second, well, it's from a layer point of view, it's the first data generation. So my workflow goes as follow. Let's say you're my client or my manager, that's better. You're my manager and you want me to build an app. And you say, Beeman, add a product and a category to my app. So the first thing we think, I start asking you questions. Okay, you want to have a product, which is the properties you want to have. Product has a name, a description, a price, and you have a category, and category has a name. One category can have many projects. So you have like a simple idea of a structure. We can draw it out. It's very simple. Now, classically, you would start, if you do like Nest, maybe with TypoRAM, you start writing a repository and you start thinking about how to do data access and you start designing all the models, but also all the operations. In Prisma instead, you're not in TypeScript land. In Prisma, you're just building your recipe and this will generate the code for you. Now, there's a few things that I'm super happy about. First of all is lines of code. So my data model is really the data model that I have. And after that, I can consume it. So this is really nice. Another really nice benefit of this is my client gets better over time. When Prisma makes updates, my client gets smarter. So we've seen cases where the syntax, how to use Prisma was a bit involved. A lot of code to do simple things. Prisma team listens, make changes, and they come with a new solution. So my client gets smarter, but I don't really have to change my app. Old stuff keeps on working. My recipe still stays the same. My data schema still stays the same. But if I update my dependency for Prisma, my client gets new features. And this is super powerful. And it saves a ton of duplication, and it's fully type safe. So it knows what fields are there. So I cannot add this.product.description if it's not there.
Yeah, it's
And
types.
this is the type safety. Yeah. So this is the first generation step. And so my data structure is always king. Data structure for me is the most important. It's like the DNA of your app. And Nest.js will communicate with this. And Nest.js, we have an architecture, so data access feature. If you think about this, data access, this is where I talk with Prisma. And my feature, in my case, is a GraphQL endpoint. And then the second data generation step is actually generating my SDK for the front end and for my tests and maybe for anything else. So maybe I got another app that wants to consume my GraphQL API. I use GraphQL code generator to generate code based on that. And I got a few prototypes that I'm working on that automatically generate your whole admin UI. So you no longer need to go in and create the modules and components and everything you need to do the front end. It will be generated for you. So this is kind of where we are with the Peng stack. So yeah, we talked about structuring the app, and this is more from an architectural point of view. What the APMs, the NXPM stack currently generates. This is what you get today. If you run it today, 2 commands, this is what you get. Now, some people ask, why not make a starter project? Why do all the hard work of building it all dynamic and all a generator as you can just build one and maintain it? So I've tried to do this in the past, and this is something I've been working on this idea for years. I've been thinking about this for years. I gave it various attempts, but it never really worked. And one of the things is that it's hard to maintain a project over time. And one of the other downsides is that if you have like one project over time, you lose a lot of flexibility. But let's say if I now want to have the same project, but I want my front end to be React, then I basically need to have a second starter project. And now I'm maintaining 2 repos. And for anybody working in an X, 2 repos, that's not what the goal is. So with NXPM stack, all these components are configurable at some point. And one of the first things that I'm going to do is basically add support for more technologies. So what you can do in this image is we have Prisma, Nest, GraphQL, Angular. If we look at it this way, what is a step beyond? Well, we have Prisma. Maybe we have our backend with Go. We still use GraphQL if we like. And you have React or Flutter on the front end. So I'm going to switch between the two, you can see that there's only a few components that changed. And this is something that, this is my end goal with NXPM stack, or end goal, at least the next big step. So I'm going to release a stable version of what I have. The next step up should have various backends and at least two other front ends. So I want to be able to do the same thing with Go and React. But now you can mix and match, because if you like to work with Nest.js and React, that's fine. If you like to work with Go and Angular, that's fine. It should all mix and match.
Oh, this is nice. So Prisma. So just to ask, Prisma can work with any backend. It's not only with Node.js.
It's a bit of a trick that I give you here. It has a client for Go and it has a client for TypeScript. I think it also has a client for Rust. But if your backend of choice is like Python, for instance, then you're sadly out of luck. Then Prisma will not work for you. So this is nice in this picture, but still, if you look about this picture, Prisma doesn't change, GraphQL doesn't really change. But I really like GraphQL, but I'm not very fanatic about it. I understand that people like to use REST. So one of the features that will be added there at some point, if somebody thinks it's important, I'm happy to land support for doing a REST API this way, because we can do REST and we can annotate REST and we can have a Swagger basically on top of it and do code generator with that. For the database side, I'm not religious about Prisma, but I like it so much that I don't really see why use something else. But if somebody thinks they have a good argument to use, let's say, TypoRem or Sequelize or whatever they like, definitely consider adding support for it. But the most important thing of building this was that all these components are spread out and isolated. So you won't find in any of the commands, you won't find that you have to work with Nest.js. And I think I'll touch on that later a little bit more. But so no, Prisma doesn't exist. Sadly, it only exists for TypeScript and Go, but not for any other things. So if you have like Rust as a backend, then at this moment, not.
I think there were a few questions. One from Naresh. I think it's not related to NXPM, but NX.
Yeah.
So NX actually supports microservices architecture. So it's his question.
Yes.
So
it does, and actually, I think you're even more able to answer this. You had a great session with Natalia and Lars, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, we did that.
Definitely suitable for microservices architecture, and I think even to the extent that some people, if they see NX and they understand it, now they have the idea, I can easily build microservices, because it's very easy to create a new app, and as you already alluded on, it's easy to share stuff between it. So that's really nice. With regards to microservices, first, you should probably ask yourself if you really need it at this point. And this is the same with micro front ends. It's super interesting. Definitely look into it if you're interested in it. But definitely take care before you start splitting up your API into microservices. Make sure you understand what the implementations are. Yeah.
Agreed. So I think Lars has a suggestion for you. You can use Spectacular as a test framework.
Yeah. So Spectacular is definitely on the radar, and it's definitely something I like to add. And so I hear you worship the data schema. How about some love for the front end? Well, yes, Lars, and this is for me GraphQL. This is what does it. So for me, what Prisma does in the backend, it provides a strongly typed way that I can program again. This is what GraphQL enables me in the front end. So it's the same thing. It's just another place in the stack. But my Nest.js publishes a GraphQL schema. I generate code and an SDK, and it's fully type safe. And I don't need to think about how to ask something from the API. I can just, in Angular, inject a service and consume it. And it's type safe. So if I change something and I break something, my Angular frontend will not compile. And this is nice because you cannot ship code that doesn't compile in this stack. Well, maybe you can, but it's hard. So I think it's a very similar structure. And actually, Prisma has roots. So this is Prisma 2. If you look at Prisma, only look at 2 and up. Don't look at Prisma 1 because it's a different project.
Okay.
But Prisma 1 actually exposed a database over GraphQL.
Oh.
So Prisma 1, and Prisma is still, for some people that know it from version 1, it's still linked to GraphQL. Right now, Prisma is technology agnostic from that sense. It can work as well with REST or GraphQL, or if you have a microservice architecture, or you do everything with WebSockets, it doesn't care. But the idea is the same. You have a strongly typed schema, and you cannot consume anything that's not in the schema, and your TypeScript will be mad at you if you do this.
Great. I think,
So, yeah, no more questions right now. Great questions
Yeah.
so far. So this is beyond the Peng stack, and we're gonna at some point be able to say, hey, what is the stack you want to use? And basically, my ultimate goal, and maybe I get there in like a year, is to have a UI where you can basically select, hey, I want to have Go with React front end and native script app, and publish it,
Wow,
generate it for you.
that's huge.
Huge if true. So I got a demo here. I'm not going to go with the demo because it's more interesting to chat. But no, I want to go back a little bit here. Yeah, these slides are two I skipped for a little bit, and I think this might drive the whole point home a bit better. So for those of you familiar with NX Workspace, you already know this, but for those who don't know it, if you have an NX Workspace, you basically think about the content of your workspace or the functionality, you think about it by technology. And the way you think about the technology is you think, hey, I want to have an Angular app. So you install the Narwhal Angular plugin, and you do an NX generate Angular app, and you pass in the name. And then the backend, you think like, okay, let's use Nest, and you're going to install the Nest plugin. And this is all good, but it's all very much related to technology. So we talk about technology level, and this is the common denominator. And then you're like, okay, I want to add Go. Is there a Go plugin? Yeah, there is one. Okay, we can add a plugin and go there. This is all nice and good. But if we look at NXVM stack, we separate our packages by functionality. So here on the top level 3, you see I have NXVM stack, and I can generate an API. And then how it gets implemented is hidden away from the user.
Okay.
So as long as these Nest, in this case, the official Nest or the community plugin Go, as long as they generate a very similar structure, it doesn't really matter which one you generate. And the same goes for the front end, Angular and React. Angular React have similarities, but they have also a lot of differences. One of the differences is that in the React land, we don't have a lot of community structure. So things tend to go way more wild with how they are structured. And in Angular, we are basically agree on a lot of things with the community. There's guidelines, and you learn to work in a certain way. You have different types of files. So in React, everything's components basically. And everything works by putting stuff in the component tree, whereas with Angular, we have dependency injection, and we can use services, and we can replace stuff, and we have injection tokens. So we have way more tools and way more instruments to make our life easy. But I figured out from a functionality point of view, it shouldn't really matter. So if I say, hey, give me a library or give me a new feature, I just wanted to create 3 libraries, make sure routing works, make sure data access works, and everything's there. And this really helped me a lot working with React teams on bigger apps. A lot of React teams that I've worked on never seen an opinionated structure like this. And initially there's a lot of doubt if this is the right thing to do, because you had a lot of files, but after a while it gets way clearer where to put stuff and what actually gets rendered. And for the backend as well, I built a Go API with a very similar structure as Nest. And the developer now has to learn Go, but at least they don't need to think about where does a file go, how to make the structure. That's all very similar to Nest. So it really helps you move between frameworks easier. And this can really help making it easier for devs to onboard. So we don't talk about the technology by itself. We talk about the desired functionality. So there will be NXVM Stack Mobile as well. And it will do the same thing. It will abstract away all the differences, or it will look for all the common things between, let's say, Ionic and React Native and NativeScript and Flutter maybe. and try to formalize this later. So this is with regards to the packages and the structure. And then if you have this one, then this switch between the two technologies makes more sense, because now you can see the red block here. The red block is just API. It doesn't really matter if it's Go or Nest. The blue one here is a front end. Doesn't really matter if you have Angular or React. The rest stays the same. And somebody could just work with it this way. I'm not sure if I'm disconnected or you, Santosh. I'm losing connection here. Oh, there you're back.
Yeah, actually, it's my primary internet which went down. So
Okay. Yeah, I was already checking out if I had connection, but okay, good to be back here. So yeah, that's basically the idea, and I think probably I have some final thoughts on this. So yeah, I had the demo, and just make sure to check one of the other talks if you're interested. But a few important takeaways. Schematics are amazing, and I think Lars already alluded on this somewhere else. Hans from the Angular CLI team, he really made a great job in formalizing this. I think a lot of devs know Joman or Joman, however you want to call it. It's a project generator. It's nice, but it only helps you with the initial setup. But afterwards, if you want to add a page, yeah, there you go. Shout out to Hans Larsen. I totally agree. Angular tooling has been way more useful. And in fact, NX, the folks from NX from Norwal, they took it up a notch, and they looked at generators and they looked at schematics, and they made their own version now of generators, which has even a cleaner API, and it might be a better fit for some projects. Now, a lot of small building blocks chained together. So if you would look today at the NXPM stack, you'll find, I think, maybe 40 different schematics. So I'm managing 40 different schematics, and one is like your admin dashboard, and the other one is your user management for the API. Now, there's a lot of separate blocks, and if you chain these all together, you get to great things. Opinion is key. It's essential that you have a strong opinion about how you things are organized and where things go. Consistency also is key. It's important that things are super consistent. So you should be able to look at a piece of code and not wonder what it does. You should know what it does. And I've seen this. It takes a bit to get used to the whole difference between data access feature, utility, and UI. But having these things in the workspace and having this as a shared opinion between your team is very important. You should automate anything you can do that can go wrong or that you might forget. And this is essential. If you work with a team with juniors on it, it's even better to have this thing. Like, don't make them think about why things, make them know what they need to do. There's a big difference here. So yeah, why not a starter template? We went over this, right? It's harder to maintain. If you think about the tech matrix, if you have a template, you cannot offer at some point like, okay, switch out this API with Go or build a plugin. Generators are also useful after creation. So after setting up the standard thing, the standard app, it's still you still have use because you can still generate a part of it. And also you can have it used as a generator for a building block for a bigger app. So if you're interested with NXPM stack, but you don't like one of the decisions I make, you can take this code, and you can basically start with my stack and start adding your own little blocks on top of it. So, and this is something, a starter template or classical scaffolding tools like Joman, but also the ones Lars briefly mentioned, they don't really provide this. It's a one-go. It's generally a one-go thing. You generate something and you're done, but they're not used to generating additional stuff and tweaking files and actually load your module in, all these kind of things. So roadmap for March 2020. I need to update the slides because it's a bit out of date. I'm about to release the first stable version. Actually, I had a huge project in April, so I didn't get to it. But I'm still on track to release the stable version. Version 5 is going to be that. It will provide documentation and tutorials, and the tool where you can just say yarn create an XPM stack, and it will start asking you questions like, hey, what do you want to use? Do you want to add the mobile app or not? Do you want to add user account management where user can go in and add their own account, or don't you care? Do you want to add an admin or not? So this should be the first version, official version. And then later I want to add support for React, Ionic, and Go. Well, Ionic is already there, so that's out right now. We got that. Adding UI libraries. So currently you can pick between Bootstrap and Tailwind. The Tailwind integration is the one by default. The Bootstrap is not maintained at this point because it's really hard to maintain two versions. But we will at some point have the ability to choose between Bootstrap, Tailwind, Material, or none. So you can say, I don't want to have any UI framework. I just want to get the plain HTML, and you can do all the styling yourself. There will be a few low-level opt-ins. So as I already said, the mailer is going to be there very quickly, where you can do the password reset cycle. This is classically something that takes a lot of time for people to implement if you've never done it before. It's not hard, but you just need to know how it works. Things like a job queue can be there, and then feature level opt-ins. So really, like, add a complete feature, like let's say courses. So you have a course structure with modules and courses and pages, etc. Or you have a CMS where you have like pages and blocks and maybe a site and an attachment. Or we can do stuff with the blockchain or AI. And this is where I'm basically calling out to the community. If you like to see something and you think you have an interesting use case as an opt-in for an XPM stack, reach out to me on Twitter or Discord, and we can definitely take a look. That's it, Santosh. That was the presentation. Lars asked for Deno. Yeah, Lars, if you built the Deno plugin, I'll plug it into the stack. But yeah, I'm basically depending on whatever is available for the NX community. So one of the I'm not working with Deno a lot. I'm not currently not using it in anything. I work also with people that do .NET. So .NET for me is an interesting to add. So this might be a first contestant. But then I also need to provide an alternative for Prisma. So this is for me like still a bit of a puzzle. I think most .NET apps connect to Azure, the SQL Server, or just the local SQL Server. Prisma actually exists for SQL Server, but it does not exist for .NET. So this is really where I need to depend on other people's knowledge. And this is whatever it gets available. Spring Boot is the later is the classic. Yeah, it will be there later at some point. Yeah, I hope so too, Lars. I hope it's earlier than the Angular roadmap. But yeah. So this is kind of where I've been working with on the site for the last few months. It's been a pretty nice project for me. It's been something that I finally got out and I had in my head a long time. Actually, in January, much love for NXPM NX. Thanks, Lars. Love for you as well. Yeah, great support. Now, for a lot of people that I connect with often, this is not very interesting tool per se. So a lot of people, maybe yourself as well, you're totally familiar and fine with generating your own app, finding a structure and doing this. And I see for a lot of developers that are maybe senior level, I don't really care a lot about the levels, but just to have an idea, developers that are comfortable working on their own, creating a whole stack from zero, you're probably not really interested in an XPM stack. I am, because it's my preference and it's my preferred stack, but I can totally see why somebody will not use it because they already have their own opinions and they have their own structure. So the takeaway here is start automating your stuff. Formalize your opinion in a contract, start automating all of it, all that you can. So this is one thing. For a lot of developers, having a tool like this is going to be really helpful because they have now a structure, they have automation built in, they can easily add new features in the same style, And this is what allows them to generate a bunch of things and then start tweaking. And when I started developing professionally as a job, I was doing developing for a long time. But when I started doing it as a job, I was working with an organization, and we used PHP at that point, and my framework of choice was Cake PHP. And it generated a whole bunch of code for me. So I would say, hey, I want to have this category feature, and now it would generate it all for me, templates, controllers, models, and I could just start tweaking. And this really got me into it because it took away a lot of doubts on how to organize it. And so yeah, this for me has been a pretty helpful thing, and I want to go back to this place, and I want to offer this to other developers that are starting out and want to do a full stack app in NX, and they like to use, let's say, Nest and Angular. They should not have to think about all these things, and they should be able to just use it, generate it. So this is kind of nice, and I'm working with another client. So a person reached out to me through GitHub. They saw my profile and they saw the app, and they reached out to me if I want to work with them. So in March, and actually going to continue right now, I've worked with them, and they're adding a layer on top of it. And if you're interested about hearing more, I invite you to come to the NX office hours on Monday. I'll be talking with Zach on the NX office hours, and we'll talk about schema driven. And schema driven is a tool that allows you to click together a whole database schema, and it will use NXPM to generate a whole app for you, but a whole working app. And these guys are doing an amazing job at taking what I built as a building block and setting a layer on top of it. And this is going to be their primary compilation target. So their goal is to build a lot of apps that work with NXPM. And so yeah, that's super excited to see how it's being received. So yeah, definitely for those watching, give it a star on GitHub. That really helps the project get visibility. So make sure to star it there. And yeah, that's about it with regards to the stack and with full stack generation.
Oh, that's really nice. I mean, I really love the project. I mean, I never actually saw an XPM. Sorry for that, but I really loved what you presented. Right, so I'm going to give a shot. Probably I'll be doing some live stream in future. So really
Awesome.
loved it.
Awesome.
So another question for you: how community can help you in this project right now?
That's a great question. The biggest help you could give today is give it a spin and let me know what you think. So I think maybe you can check the repo and you can check it out what it does. But I think the biggest benefit is just give it a spin, follow the instructions I had on the slide here to start it out, and give me your feedback. I'm super curious about your feedback, and feel free to send me a message on Twitter. Or feel free to jump into the Discord. I'm also at Santo's Discord, so I should be there as well. Feel free to send me a message and just tell me your honest opinion, what you like, what you don't like, what is confusing. There is not a lot of docs at this moment, but I do have some drafts. So if you're interested about now what is the next step, just let me know and I'll happily provide that. But yeah, this testing it out is the most important one. And then if somebody wants to help me getting the doc site out, that would be amazing, because nxpm.dev, my website currently doesn't really nxpm.dev. It currently doesn't really feature it. It only says, hey, go to the repo. But this is my old site. It has the old logo and it's not really recent anymore. So you just want to go to this project nxpm/stack on GitHub. You go here, and this is what you need to do. Creating a new project. There you go. This is all you need to do, and then follow the terminal, and it will give you instructions on what to do next. So it'll ask you a yarn setup step. You do yarn setup, and it will set it all up for you. So yeah, I see Lars mentioning the piggies. Yep, this was the old NXPM logo. I need to look at it here. Old NXPM logo was actually inspired by the piggies from Jeff B. Cross.
Yeah.
But at this moment, I now got a real logo, and I think
Uh-huh.
it's prettier. Oh, I need to do a git push. I will push up a version. So this is one other thing. So you can do the stack and generate it yourself. This takes you about 10 minutes. If you only want to check out the project itself, take one of these stack version something, and this will give you a generated project. And here you can see the new logo in full glory.
Looks nice.
Thanks. But this is the whole project that gets generated, and you can just download this and use it as any other one. So you can run your own setup, and then you start the API and the dev, and it should all work. You need to have Docker, or you need to have Postgres running on the default port on localhost, either one of two, and then it will automatically work. And it also comes with the generation steps and the basic things you need to know. So this tutorial, this README should help you build pretty quickly, and you'll be up and running in a few minutes.
Wow.
And honestly, I didn't really calculate it, but from a new project point of view, if I would start a project from 0 today, I would at least spend a day, maybe 10 or
Agreed.
15 hours setting it all up. And this is something you can do in 10 minutes. You can still charge your client 20 hours if you want,
Yeah.
right? You can still charge them, or tell your boss that you're super busy, and you can just run this while you go play with your family or do shopping. So this should really help you a lot of time. And if you have ideas on how to improve it, for me, I'm super open to comment. I'm really depend on other people's opinion to help this make shape.
Okay, that's great. So I'll also send a tweet about this probably on Monday, so people can
Yeah,
contribute and get involved.
awesome. Yeah, thanks a lot for giving me some time and to present what I've been working on today, Santosh. I really appreciate the airtime here.
That's really fine. So apart from this, there is anything you want to promote?
So I'm a founder of Foundation Bsoft Labs, and this is something I'd like to promote just for awareness. We are a foundation. The website is in Spanish, so I'm not sure how many of your viewers are comfortable reading Spanish. I don't.
I know Lars, but
Lars can probably do Spanish. I would amazed if he wouldn't. But what we are a foundation with that gives away free boot camps for students here in Colombia. So in Colombia, there's a huge gap between income, but also a huge gap between possibilities. This is probably something that's very familiar for somebody from India. This is sadly here the same case. In the city where I'm living, beautiful city, we live in a valley, and down in the valley is where all the opportunities are. And people on the outside of the valley, they literally don't have access to this. Now, even with the pandemic, absolutely makes it worse. But even before, it's really frustrating for me to see that there's a ton of opportunities in the valley, and people are actually recruiting. They come to meetups, they ask, come work for us. And there's thousands, if not millions of people who live in the more poor neighborhoods, to put it this way, and they don't have opportunity to go. So when I see this, I figured I can use my privilege to help this blend in. And so I started with Foundation as a collaboration with Code Your Future from England. And now since 2020, we're a self-standing foundation. It's called Bsoft Labs. We're run by volunteers. My wife works at the foundation as a coordinator, so she runs it all. Actually, she does the whole, as you know, in the back, the wife runs it all. But I get to be the face of the leader now, and we are run totally by volunteers. Besides her role, we have a lot of ex-students that are on the team that help form it. We just started a new progress, and I think in 6 months or 7 months from now, we have a new group of developers ready to start work. And in a country like Colombia, this is really a life-changing event, right? So this is, if you get a steady income to somebody who never had it, this has an effect on their lives, but also their family, maybe their neighbors. And this is what we like to achieve, like a ripple effect of doing positive things like teaching code, which is fun and interesting, but most of all, super useful. I think a lot of developers, it's been life-changing. And even for me, coming from a Western country, it really made a huge difference in what I could do when I got a serious job as a developer. So I know it firsthand. The reason I can travel and I live abroad and and have basically changed my life was because of code. And
Exactly.
I want to give the same opportunity to other people. And this is what the foundation does. Also for NXPM project, I do ask, there's a little sponsor button, but my sponsorship, people that sponsor me, and by the way, Santos, you're one of my sponsors. Thank you so much. You're changing life. Your sponsorship's changing lives in Colombia because my sponsorship get tunneled into the foundation right away. And so yeah, this is my main side project. Basically, not professional. This is what I do from the heart, and it's amazing to see so far. I don't have any kids, but I see the students as somehow my kids, and I'm super proud if I see them land a job and hear about their success stories. And yeah, it's simply amazing. So give it a check. Practice a little bit of your Spanish because you can take away what we're talking about here. And yeah, that's basically it. I would love if people could follow me on Twitter and interact with me there. And also, I do streams, also inspired by Santosh. So bman-dev is my channel there. I do a lot of stuff about Prisma, Angular, also React. I'm gonna do some Go, and I'm gonna do some blockchain projects as well. So
Yes.
so that's all going to be there, and I think that's it. Yeah, go also come on to the Angular Discord if you're not already. We have a great community there, a lot of
Yeah.
activity each day, and
Agree.
I guess that's it.
Wow. I mean, people who are listening online, so just go ahead and probably you can support. I'm sure you can actually go ahead and at least do GitHub sponsor for Biman. So he already shared his GitHub account. You
Yeah,
can support via GitHub sponsor program, which is like available in all the countries. So do that. That will be a huge help. I
yeah,
mean, so it really touched my heart because I am someone who came from a slum. So I used to live in a slum in Mumbai, and then I'm much better in better condition just because of
yeah,
I learned to code. So
yeah.
yep, you are
It's
changing life for sure.
life-changing events, and yeah, it's great as an example. And I actually read your stories about this as well. You've shared about this in the past. For me, so coming from the Netherlands, that's if you're young in the Netherlands, this is something you only see on TV, right? And they literally teach you, oh, there's a lot of poor people in the world, and then but yeah, still you're eating your food each day, and you have water, and you have a shower, and you have a bed, and you have your own little room. So for me, this was a very remote thing until I started living in a country like Colombia. But I've also traveled to Southeast Asia, and I've been in Africa, and I've been in quite a few places, and it made me aware that where I come from is the exception. Basically, it's not the norm that everybody has food and everybody has things. And it made me feel thankful, of course, for the situation I was born in. But it's also very random, right? I never choose. I was just like, yeah, pop there. And for me, the most important thing that changed my it changed from an ID to actually execution was a talk by An Juan,
Mhm.
and I'm going to share his Twitter account. But you should definitely follow this guy and check one of his talks. And I'll share one of his talks on Twitter any of these days. But he has a talk about lending your privilege, and the main thing he drives away. If you're in a position where you're privileged, let's say you have a job and you have an income, you can lend this privilege to help other people become successful. And
Agreed.
this does not take away your success. Like if I help you get a job, it's not that I lose my job. Probably the opposite. People will say, "Hey, nice, you brought on a helpful person. Help me find the other one, the next one." And this is something that really changed my life and really made me from thinking about doing something like a foundation to actually going and doing it. And yeah, this guy was definitely pivotal in my understanding. Going from, so my initial goal was to do a meetup, and just a meetup or two meetups, and this was the goal. And now we have a foundation where we actually have people and volunteers, and yeah. So check Angwan's tweet about lending privilege. It's highly recommended for anybody. And also, you don't need to be rich or you don't need to be famous in order to lend your privilege. You can be just a modest guy. I'm just a normal guy from the Netherlands, from the province. I'm nothing really special. My parents were teachers. It's nothing out of the ordinary, just a modest, normal living guy. And I have a lot of things to give. And what we see with our students, they come from maybe a slum. We have different names here, but it's similar. They come from a very, very simple situation, a very, not a lot of resources. And after this change, they're able to help and share their privilege. So we try to take people from 0 to 1%, and then from there on, you can go do it yourself. But the first step is probably the hardest. We try to provide that.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for sharing that.
It's my pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's it for the day. So sorry, I became a little bit emotional, but yeah. So that's it for the day. And next week, so let's talk about next week, and that will be the final episode of this month. And we are going to talk about core web vitals, and we will have Pratik Bhatnagar, who is from who actually recently moved to India. He used to work in P-React team previously for Google, and now he works for Uber in India. So he'll be talking about core web vitals, same time next Friday, 10 p.m. IST. And apart from that, on weekend, of course, if you are following me on Twitter, so I have started this Angular Getting Started free workshop. So you can actually join from 6 to 8 p.m. IST. It's totally free, and it's 2 hours every weekend, so Saturday, Sunday. So it will be live tomorrow, and probably I'll be doing few more streams. I have to actually complete few PRs for Lumberjack, so probably just keep and watch on Twitter. I'll be doing some live streaming in the morning as well. So that's it for the day, and follow Biman on YouTube and his Twitter handle, and also you can connect with him on Discord. And that's it. So see ya, bye bye, and have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye bye. Thanks for watching, everybody.